Hello, I'm David Childs, and I'm the Director of Product Development at Vector Photonics. I'd like to talk to you about Vector Photonics, pixel technology, and the breakthrough in semiconductor laser design that pixels give us. So first of all, Vector Photonics was incorporated in 2020, just as COVID hit. We have a fab-free business model where we can use foundries to make our devices. The company is built upon novel semiconductor laser technology, and we are targeting applications in several key photonic sectors. So where are semiconductor lasers used? Well, vertical cavity surface emitting lasers, VCSELs, are used largely in mobile and consumer applications these days. And this is a large expanding market, so it's a good place to be. Edge emitting lasers, the other type of incumbent laser, is used largely in optical communications. And this again is a large expanding market sector. So there's a few areas here. VCSELs are low cost, so they've reached the consumer market. Edge emitting lasers are good for sending data. So they are all the way through our data centers and our telecoms networks. So semiconductor laser choices then, what drives these things? We have edge emitting lasers, where we have the simplest one, the Fabry-Perot laser, where it's a cleaved semiconductor crystal here, is not single frequency. The DFB, we put a corrugated grating in there above the quantum well or below, and that gives us single mode operation. These things have feedback and gain in plane together, so it's difficult to decouple the two things. The light comes out the end of these things is astigmatic. We can increase power by making the device longer. With the VCSEL, the surface emitting laser here, we have a dBr above and below the quantum well. We have feedback is out of plane due to these mirrors, and emission, the gain, is also out of plane. These things can be tested on wafer, so it can be very low cost because you select known good die early. The pixel is a surface emitting laser, but we have in-plane feedback and gain and out-of-plane emission. So we've decoupled those two things that are inherently the same in either the edge emitting laser or the vertical one. So this gives us quite some advantage. We can scale the area and the gain in plane, and we can make arrays to couple these together to get very, very high powers indeed. We can use the outer plane emission to do on-wafer testing and to make good beam qualities. Where do these things come in the big world? Cost, speed, and power are the three things people want from a laser. Lowest cost is LEDs. Then we have VCSELs due to this on-wafer test capability. If we want power with that, we can make arrays of VCSELs. High speed, solid state lasers are not particularly scalable for deployment. We have edge emitting lasers can get the speed, and we can put arrays of them together again to get power. Pixels sit in the middle. We can have low cost due to the on-wafer test and good optical quality. We can have high speed, as we'll see in this talk, and we can have high power by area scaling or coupling these things together in plane. Current performance of our devices, if we look at some basic data on these very large devices, these are 200 by 200 microns. They've only got 3 in-gas quantum wells and a relatively low threshold gain. And we'll see later why this is important. Because of the large area, the threshold current is quite high, but we get high output power over 100 milliwatts with more than 40 dB SMSR. So spectrally, they are quite nice. Temperature dependence, due to these quantum wells don't have aluminium quaternary, but nonetheless, they reach 80 degrees centigrade with a temperature coefficient of threshold around about 150 Kelvin, which is quite acceptable. But due to the detuning of these particular devices between the grating and the gain, this thing drops off quite rapidly at higher temperatures. Okay, moving on to the modulation data. If we look at high-speed small signal modulation, just above threshold, we have this thing operating around 1 gigahertz. If we increase to double threshold, this thing comes out to beyond 4 gigahertz. We can plot the square root of current above threshold against that resonant frequency. We get a straight line fitting as we do with the other laser types. And we can also plot the resonance frequency against the damping factor and find out what the speed limit to this device would be. So as it stands, we can get 5 gigabit per second modulation with more than 100 milliwatts of output power. The damping limit to this device, if we could get large amounts of current in without it heating up, we could get to about 20 gigahertz, which is fairly acceptable given the power. We are at this red point on our graph, these large device sizes where we get the high power operation. This is how our devices were designed at the moment to test power scaling. Speed is limited due to large area, meaning a high parasitic capacitance and a large mode volume, which is important, as we'll see in a minute. We simply need to shrink the device to make it faster. Once we get down to sizes below 5 by 5 microns, we can comfortably exceed 25 gigahertz operations, according to our calculation. So what are those speed limiters? And what is the performance we expect? So what determines resonant frequency? We have a standard rate equation in semiconductor lasers that apply equally to pixels. So our resonance frequency is a function of refractive index we can't do much about, or speed of light. We have differential gain, we have photon density in the cavity, and we have photon lifetime, or our key handles that we can turn. So with VCSELs and edge-emitting lasers, decades and decades of work to push these very close to their present limits. But there's so many trade-offs that exist, it's difficult to get further than that. If we just have a table here of a high-speed VCSEL design and a high-speed edge emitter design that we look at, we can see these sorts of frequencies, 20 and 18 gigahertz, which give us 25 gigabit per second modulation. But there's not a lot of margin, so yield is lower than it should be. If we put similar parameters in for the pixel, and we have the ability to use a quantum well stack similar to edge-emitting laser, but a cavity volume similar to a VCSEL, we can actually get double the frequency. So we can well exceed 25 gigabit per second operation. Small lateral mode volume and a quantum well stack with high differential gain are the two key things that we can have in a pixel. That's difficult to achieve with either other technology. Okay. So to summarize, we've shown some high power device results, over 100 milliwatts of laser power, up to 80 degrees centigrade operation, and we're getting 4 gigahertz of modulation bandwidth. And we understand the design process, and we've got some of these designs underway now for 25 gigabit per second and beyond modulation speeds. And pixels themselves, we have complete wavelength flexibility. Any wavelength where you can make a DFB, we can make a pixel. That's not true of a VCSEL. We can make high power, and we can scale individual devices in arrays to get very high power. We can have phased arrays, so we can have beam steering. And today's topic was we can get very high data rates. So thank you for your time today. Are there any questions?